It's episode 3 of the Lessons from Sports podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Partello, and I just get excited when I get to chat with some friends from back in the day. And this episode is one of those experiences, and I'm just excited that now I record them and can share them with you. My old buddy, Rob Bradford from WEEI. Rob's a reporter, writer, broadcaster, podcaster, and we go back in time to my days working with Rob at WEEI in Boston, but also talk about this sort of journey of his career, of figuring out what he wanted to do and chasing after the things that actually make him happy is I think really cool and interesting to share. And Rob has been around championship organizations, championship athletes, championship coaches, and really takes those lessons and starts to apply some of them here in this conversation. So enjoy this conversation with my old friend, Rob Bradford. Okay, so I've been really excited to have this conversation with an old friend of mine, Mr. Rob Bradford, who you can follow at Bradfo, which has always made me laugh. But Rob and I have had, we've known each other at this point probably 18 years, 16 years, but worked together back in the day. But Rob, thanks for being here.
Hey, man, listen, you're one of my favorites, and you're the straw that stirs the drink in so many ways. Always been that case, going back to when we were working together. You're an idea guy, but also I think that, Wayne, you care about people, which you care about people and you care about the things that people do. So those two things there, you can shut this off because those are the two most important things and you're good at it.
Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's we obviously have some fun and bump into each other at a lot of baseball events throughout the year, and it's always great to get to spend time. And as I told you, I think it's important for people to hear, some of the conversations I get to have with people. I want to start sharing some of those as much as we can. So if you don't mind, could you tell everybody kind of, I know your story, but sort of the story of Rob Bradford and how you got to today?
Yeah, so I think my story, and I've said this a lot, but my story is much like you, Wayne. I mean, this isn't a straight path, and this is a lot of lessons. This isn't just going to Northwestern and getting a journalism job straight out of college, and that's how it is. It's good for the people who can do that, but I wasn't one of those people. And so I basically, the first thing I would say is that I was a terrible high school student, and it was just basically one English teacher complimenting me on a paper that I wrote about playing pickup football that finally said somebody is complimenting me on something. And that set me down the road of maybe I can write, possibly. So I go to college, went to Springfield College, got into it, started finding that passion while dipping my toe in a million different other sports things because all I knew was that I like sports, like a lot of people. We like sports. Let's do something with sports. So I go through college, and then when you break into the newspaper industry, back then that's what it was, it's hard. There's not a lot of jobs. They obviously don't pay a whole lot. And so I started as a freelancer at the Salem News and then ran my own freelance company. And I didn't have my first full-time job till I was 29. And that's a year and a half, 2 years after I had my first kid. And that was at the Gloucester Times. And then went from the Gloucester Times to a magazine, to the Lowell Sun, to the Eagle Tribune, to the Boston Herald. And that's how it was done then, right? You do as good a job as you can at newspapers, and they get progressively bigger until I finally went to EEI, where we met. WEEI, maybe we might have met a little bit before that, having done some work there. And the radio station, the sports radio station, at that point was the biggest and the best when it came to driving conversation. So when we talked about starting a website, it only made sense that we could compete against the Globe and the Herald and all these other places. And we were starting with a blank slate. I mean, this is one of the things I think we share, Wayne, is when you're presented an opportunity to build something like this is something with some resources behind it. How can you not do that? And I think you and I both did that together at WEI and WEI.com. And that was 2008 when nobody was really doing it. And then a year later, ESPN was doing it locally, Comcast is doing it locally, but I've been at EEI since then, but it's in all different iterations and all different. And right now, landing with a lot of podcasting stuff, which again, 2008, what was a
Right.
podcast? But it is. I think that there's been a lot of twists and turns, but the common thread here is that if you latch on to what you want to do, and I think you're the same way, if you latch on to what you want to do ultimately, just keep going down that road as long as you can, and just taking a step forward. I think I did that with the newspapers I went to, um, and just keeping a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better to the place where you land in a what I thought was because I thought the Boston Herald was my dream job,
Right.
Wayne. Like I thought that was it. Covering the Red Sox for the Boston Herald,
You made it.
that seems kind of silly now, but I thought that was my dream job, and then I went to EEI and they slid the piece of paper across the desk. And I'm like, well,
I got a new
see you
dream.
later, dream job.
No, it's true. I mean, back then that was the pinnacle, like writing for a local paper covering the Red Sox, which was the number one story in town. And, I working at WEI, you're right. I mean, it was the conversation starter for the entire city and sometimes nationally because the teams were so big, as obviously the Patriots took the world by storm and all of that. I think is crazy. Were you always a baseball guy?
Yeah, I mean, kind of. I think that I played basketball, and actually, when I was at the Little Sun, that's what I covered high school sports. But the one thing that they let me cover was basketball, was the
Okay.
Celtics. So I did that. But while I was at the Little Sun, and listen, when I was at the Little Sun, they're great people, but you're driving in to answer, taking scores of field hockey games and soccer games, and that's what you're doing. Why I was doing that, I decided I was going to write a baseball book because I knew JP Ricciardi, who was the GM of Toronto, just from being around. And so it's like one of these things where, the books are like, it's a bucket list
Hmm.
thing. So I would be doing this book while answering field hockey calls. So that helped me. Even it was a baseball book, it was on the Red Sox, it was on the Blue Jays, and so that really helped me define myself as a baseball guy, um, because when I didn't really ever get a chance to write fully about the Red Sox until I went to the Lawrence Eagle Tribune in 2005. So I was, 35 years old, when
It's
I first
crazy.
started writing it. And even then, it wasn't like I was traveling. And then a year and a half later, the Boston Herald and Wayne, like the reason why I got that job at the Herald was because the Eagle Tribune did something. Oh my goodness, what is this? It's a blog. They let me blog,
Wow.
right? And so that allowed me to actually get a lot of my work out there, which hadn't been seen before because the newspapers hated the internet. The newspapers hated giving away things for free. And because I was able to show my work, the Herald came calling, and that's when it was all in on baseball.
It's really interesting too in like business. Like you talk about the newspapers hated the online print and we worked in you still work for a radio company. I worked from radio, like podcasts were, we don't do those because we do this. And it's like you can't stop the world from evolving because it helps your business. Like you just can't. It's crazy and too many try. We see it with sports leagues. Like I mean, like what the NBA just did to try to evolve. What like baseball just did this season with implementing pitch clock and all these things. Because if you don't evolve, like I tell everybody, if you either evolve or dissolve, like it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah, Wayne, and it's so true, and I'm glad you made that analogy with radio and podcast because, like I said before, with the newspapers, I remember newspaper it would be you would have space limitations. Say, well, why don't we just put more on the internet? Oh, we can't do that. That's giving it away for free. Like, well, it's not going away, and we learned that to be true. And with radio, I remember, and these people, I won't say their names, but it was the we were trying to do podcasts, and the radio host said, "Don't you dare drop that podcast
Mm-hmm.
during my show."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Or don't you dare take any audio from my show and play it during my show. And so, like, it was all of that. And there was this thinking of, well, we can't let them listen to it. And it's Wayne, I think it's the same way now, where you have these shows and they think that, well, of course you're going to listen to it. No, if they don't like listening to something for a minute, there's going to be hundreds of other things to listen to.
It's coming at you
And I
so
think that, and
fast.
you know this as well as I, as simple and sensical as that is, for radio people for a long, long time, they just couldn't get their head around that.
Yeah,
It's
a lot of
crazy.
people have a hard time adjusting to what's happening in the world because it doesn't benefit them, as opposed to adjusting and finding a way to help it benefit the listener or the customer or the consumer, whatever it may be. Like, their world is changing, so you have to evolve to keep serving them, or you'll be in trouble. I think when we think back to those days, I think about a story. I tell it all the time. I've never told it on here, so here it is. But I met with some of those radio hosts, and we were talking about social media back then, back in 07, 08. And we said, hey, this thing, Twitter, is a thing. Like, you got to really start thinking about Twitter. And I know you were in this meeting with me where they said, you don't pay me to tweet. You pay me to talk for 4 hours on the radio. And then years later, they were so far behind getting their reach on Twitter, so that when the radio company took away those contracts, they didn't have that built-in reach on their own channels. And, it was a detriment. It's because, you wanted the world to come to you because it had come to newspaper writers. The world had come to those writers because they were the established, quote unquote, experts of the space. But the world ran right by, and all of a sudden the consumer was able to pick, and choose who they wanted to hear from.
Listen, Wayne, I mean, and I know, I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, I have around 70,000 Twitter followers. It's not because I'm great on Twitter.
That's for sure.
It's because I got in pretty early. And it was. I
Right.
mean, and I know a lot of people that you're talking about who you're like, why don't they have more Twitter followers? Like, well, because it literally, they waited until
Yep.
2012 to get in on
Yeah.
it. And then it was really hard to build up. The last example that I'll give is was when our radio station finally was going in a battle and had been overtaken, and then finally won a ratings period. And it was really because we had the Celtics and they went to the finals. And there was this email like, congratulations, we did it, we figured it out, blah, blah, blah. And then we had one host replied all saying, yeah, and we did it, and so did it, and they didn't even need that stupid Twitter or whatever it was,
Wow.
social media. Yeah, they didn't need, yeah. And it was like, okay, really? Really?
It,
So, I mean, it seems so silly to think about now, but I think if you spin it toward the here and the now, those are the lessons that we should draw
yeah,
from,
no
right?
doubt.
Whether it's Instagram, whether it's TikTok, whether it's how people are consuming things and all of it. That's the message, and that's the lesson we should wake up every single day
Well,
remembering.
and you've been around, obviously covered a bunch of championship teams. And I know you've at this point, how many books have you written? Three
3,
books
yeah,
with, like,
3.
all different types of personalities at different levels, from players to general managers. Is there anything that stands out to you of, like, the people who have succeeded and what has helped them succeed?
Well, I think that number 1 is what we're talking about. The people who aren't rigid in their ways, and they're listening a lot. They're listening, like, I hope that people who listen to you, listen to this, like, you always have to be listening and learning and not be set in your ways, and understand, I think especially now, and this goes, let's say, with baseball, right? There's this analytics versus old school, and
Yeah.
it's all right to listen. You can take what you want, but it's all right to listen and learn and implement, and then communicate and adjust the right way. I think that's the biggest thing, is that people in our industry, there's still people who they say, I'm going to write, and this is, I guess, this is the biggest challenge that we're facing right now in sports journalism. I am going to write this because I want to write it, and this is how I'm going to write it. And screw the rest of you. I don't care. Well, sorry. Number one, I tell everybody, you do what the company wants to do so you can do what you want to do. That's the reality of this, what the job is now. And also understand, like, for instance, a story, the most important part of the story is the headline, because no one's getting to the story without a good
Yep.
headline. And then the next important part is the first sentence. And then the next important part is the first paragraph. Anybody who is going to think that they can write like they used to, and people have the attention span to power through a story without tweets and videos and whatever it is, like they are totally off base. So to come back to your question, I think that whether it's athletes, whether it's people in sports media, whatever it is, whatever company it is, I think that the ability to listen, learn, and implement, and also it's, for me, being around teams and franchises compared to being around, I'll just say it, radio station management. A lot of times, it's like two different worlds. A lot of
Mhm.
times, and I think that this covering, I know more about the human body than I would if I didn't cover baseball, because I hear about these
Right.
injuries. Much like I know more about actually managing a franchise or a team or anything because I'm around these. And so I think that, I mean, that just comes back to what I was saying, is that take every little bit you can and implement it some way, and just don't be closed minded.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. I mean, you and I, we bumped into each other at the World Series this year, and you look at, somebody like a Bruce Bochy, who it would be really easy to look at him and go, here's this older guy. There's no way, that his systems could relate to today's players, but he's obviously finding ways to win in every decade because he's evolving with the game and with the
Mhm.
players to become the greatest manager that those people need to find a way to succeed together as a team. I think that is totally underestimated in today's in the world.
Yeah, and also, find acknowledge your weaknesses, and I think that acknowledge your weaknesses and fill in the gaps. I mean, I think that's what guys like Bochy do. It's okay. I'm going to find, Bruce Bochy had Will Venable as his bench coach.
Love Will
Will
Venable.
Venable
He's
is,
the
I don't say
best.
he's a young guy, but he's a younger guy who went to Princeton, who might look at things a little bit differently, and um, it's all good to get along with the people that you're working with, but you have to acknowledge your
Yep.
weaknesses, and I know that I acknowledge my weaknesses. I turn to you. When it comes to marketing, I turn to you. I turn to other people when it comes to social
Mhm.
media. I turn to a lot of people about a lot of things. But if you don't acknowledge your weaknesses, it's like forget about it.
One of the things that I've seen in your career, which I think when you look back to our weei.com days back in those '08 to, I was there on the .com side, '08 to 10, um, the talent that was kind of pulled together on that team. And I think through the years, I've watched you, you've done an amazing job of picking talent and seeing, some of the young writers that we had at .com. And even after I left, that went on to now just having great careers, right? I mean, the roster is impressive. What were the things that you looked for in those young folks that were like, okay, I'm going to give, this Alex Spear a chance. I'm going to give, DJ Bean an opportunity to work here. That they've both, I mean, I look at both those guys, incredible careers, but they started working at EEI.com. I think both of them as part-timers.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Alex was actually, when we started, I was allowed
You're
one
right. You're
full-time
right.
hour.
Alex was your number.
And
Yeah, you're right.
Alex Spear was, he's obviously one of the best baseball writers in the
Hands down.
country now for the Boston Globe. And but he was freelancing for the Manchester Union Leader in New Hampshire, but I knew him from the press box. And I mean, he's the best example, is that you want smart people. Alex is one of the smartest people you'll ever meet. But I think the biggest thing is work ethic. It just is. I mean, there's no way around it. Is Wayne, when we were going through those early days, I mean, that was
It was a
unbelievable.
grind.
I mean, there was the epitome of a startup at a place that wasn't used to having that startup
Yep.
mentality. So you have to have with every one of these people you're mentioning. I'm thinking back, and I think it starts with work ethic. It starts with the the strong desire to kick ass. Right? That's it. I mean, that's the best way to put it. And I got that from Theo Epstein when he was talking about the older guy that he brought in, this guy Bill LaJoy, said, listen, he has a strong desire to kick ass. I mean, that resonates with me. Like everybody, because it's this is going to come off wrong, but if the first thing you hear is about work-life balance, which is important, I'll say it. But if that's the first thing you hear, or I can't do this or I can't do that, I mean, there's plenty of examples of this. It's uh, Wayne. It comes down to this: is that do you have a passion for whatever the job is? Like that's what it is. Do you have a passion to kick ass, to succeed, to do whatever you can for the company that you're working with to get to that ultimate goal? And I right now, because of nobody wants to have their job end. I mean, I still wake up at 5:30 every morning and make sure that I have my podcast up by 7 a.m. every single day. And because now my goal is what it is, and that's what it is. And I have people who I'm working with that same mindset. So I just think the biggest, and sometimes some really good people who are successful don't have that mindset. Maybe they have it figured out. They have, I'm talented enough to do just enough.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the case. But our crew, Wayne, and the crew that like I always want to be a part of was, hey, we were like, let's go kick the ass of the
Mm-hmm.
Globe, the Herald, 98.5, whoever it is, but this kicked their ass. That's what it is. And that's the common thread, I think, everybody that we dealt
And
with.
we had a very clear goal too. I mean, Jesse, who was our developer, who now works at Quento with us, is we talk about it every so often. He and I will having a drink and we'll talk about the goal. We had this this million page views or million unique visitors per month was like the goal. And I remember we were getting close, and like 1 month we were right there, and it was like, next month is our month. Like we could actually pull this off. We've got enough days in the month to like push the number and like all of these things. And it was like, okay, what's the strategy? What are we going to put in place? What are the storylines that are going to pop? And then how are we going to seed it out there? And I still remember like achieving that goal as a team, and just like the feeling of like, yeah, we did work 18-hour days. We did work, but as a group, we came together with a common goal. And the goal was kicking that ass of like, we're going to get there and we're going to do it together. And there was no time for drama. There was no time for he said, she said.
No.
It was no. We have one goal and we got 31 days to get there. Let's go. We're at day 27. There's no time right now.
Yeah, and I think that it comes in different forms. I mean, it probably comes in different forms in your line of work. It comes in different forms, and for me, downloads or whatever it is. But another big part of that, and you touched on it, is hey, I got to step out to pick up my kid. Can someone pick this up? And without fail, our entire time
Mm-hmm.
there, without fail, there was like nobody who wasn't ready to jump
Yep.
in and say, I got it. I got it. And that's a mentality I think that also is really, really important for any
One of my
organization.
favorite memories with you when we're about to transition into the next phase of this podcast, but when I wanted to share this story because it's a fun one and it ladders up to that of whatever it takes. The Red Sox were in the playoffs in 2012 probably, and I mean 2008 and because I was already gone. So 2008 Red Sox were in the playoff, 2007 whatever it was. So you're covering the Sox, and I was the video guy for the department at that point, but I was also still DJing at nights and weekends. And so we had to get a post game video up, but I was also booked to DJ that night. And so literally you would text me when it was time and I would put on a long track and my like intern would like watch the board. I would sprint upstairs with a camera, record your post game, right? And literally go back, finish my DJ set and go home and edit that piece down so that when everybody woke up in the morning, the post game was there. Like your thoughts in the morning notes that you would do in video form were same exact thing. Were posted at 5:30 in the morning, so when people woke up, it was there and it looked like it was fresh content. But I remember like it was like whatever it takes. You were like, Wayne, I know you got the side gig where you're earning money. I'll step out of the ballpark to work with you. You step out of the nightclub to come do it with me. But it was whatever it took. And by the way, it all worked. It was an amazing. That was a fun month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I think that we're very fortunate, Wayne. I mean, you're a perfect example of this, of just that was the stuff that when you're launching something that you don't think of is
Mm-hmm.
incredible. I mean, we were launching a website and we stayed up all night posting stories. I'm like, okay, how are we going to do this tomorrow? And nobody had thought
Nope.
about it. So we're like, we can't possibly do this way every
Yep.
day. And so, but I think that everybody, Alex obviously being right there, the amount of as smart as talented as he was, you're not going to find a better work
Nope.
ethic ever. Not going to find a better work ethic than you. And I can keep going down the list, Trags and
Yep.
Chris Price and all these people. And we were just very fortunate. And I think that I would hope that every organization strives for that sort of mentality. And I got to imagine it's harder. It's more difficult than it has been. I know that I try to preach to my kids about that, but it is more
Yep.
difficult because I think that I don't know. I mean, not to sound like old man yelling at clouds, but I think the overall message isn't quite as pointed about, hey, listen, you're in this, let's
Yep.
go, let's win.
I also think
So,
remote work is making it tougher to feel like you're part of a team. I think leaders and
mm,
of organizations need to find ways to bring the people together to find that connective tissue that you do want to fight for the person next to you. You do want to put in that extra because you don't want to let them down. Versus like it's another face on a box on a screen. It could be any face in that box on the screen. So, all right, we have to transition because this is going. I know you have an out. So phase 3 of the podcast is one of my favorites. And I know you've covered many of these uncomfortable situations. It's the hot seat. So, in sports, you're not doing like what you're doing, and it's time you start to feel that pressure. Well, this is about rapid fire questions, some fun, some serious, but we'll go through them quickly. You can just fire off your answers as you go. So, all right, number one, I know you have your Baseball Isn't Boring podcast. Do you have a favorite guest you've had on so far?
I mean, I've had a lot of, Joey Votto was on, and I don't know if he was my favorite, but he was my most
Okay.
unique because he's a guy that makes you work for it. So he gives you answers that you don't necessarily expect, so you caught off guard. So I kind of like that. But Wayne, whenever I'm asked this question, I always go to
Yeah.
Pedroia. You know, I always go to Pedroia just because we have a good relationship and we could give each other a lot of crap, and those are the
No
best
doubt.
ones.
No doubt. Best place to eat in Fort Myers.
Oh, Twin Peaks.
Come on. That's your go-to now?
I mean, it sounds bad, right? I get like how that sounds bad, but you have to understand, like, all I eat is chicken
Right.
wings. Like, all I want is chicken wings and a place to watch games. And Fort Myers, there's not a lot of
Yep.
that. So, I mean, you weren't there when Twin
No,
Peaks was
no.
around,
We
but
had we yeah.
no, but
Yeah, that
so it's yeah, I'm simple. You know how that works because you live that life of it's long days, and then all you do is you go out and you eat somewhere with all the other writers, and you bitch about stuff, and then you do it again the next
Okay,
day.
we're gonna go the opposite way because what a lot of people don't know is when you go to like spring training as a writer or content person, you live in a house usually with all your coworkers for that period of time. Messiest roommate you ever had?
Oh, I mean, me? Can I? I've got to answer this question with a quick
Okay, I like
story, a
it.
very quick story. So we have to rent, as you know, we basically rent a new place every year. It's cheaper to rent a condo for 2 or 3 people than it is to a hotel room. So one year we rented a house and it was kind of shady. They were doing construction and it was just sort of a shady situation. It wasn't certainly wasn't on Verbo or anything
Mhm.
like that. So we get so we are halfway through the rental, like halfway through the month. And one of the guys who was living with us walks in the garage, and in the garage, underneath this tarp, sees 2 feet hanging out of the tarp.
Come on.
And it turned out we had no idea, but the guy had his like caretaker sleeping in our garage while we were there.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, the spring.
Yeah, and needless to say, so we said, "Hey, what's the deal with the guy sleeping in our garage?" And needless to say, we could not track down a security deposit. In fact, we couldn't track down the guy's email after we left. I mean, there are some shady situations, but when you have someone living in the
Yeah,
garage,
that's
yeah.
pretty.
So I would say that
Yeah.
guy, his name was Turfhead. I remember
I
it.
love it.
He's my messiest housemate.
What's your what you've been to? Okay, how about this? Have you? Are there any ballparks you haven't been to yet?
Milwaukee.
Really? That's the only
Yeah.
one you have left.
Yeah, Milwaukee. I think so. I went so the one we saw each other, the
Yep.
Rangers, I hadn't been to that
Globe
new
Life.
one until the World Series this year. Um, but I believe that's the only one. Yeah, Milwaukee, that's the only one.
And is there? Do you have a favorite?
Um, yeah, I mean, I get a soft spot for Camden
Okay.
Yards because I was married in Baltimore, and when I was married, it was like actually a great place to be and new, and the scene around it was pretty awesome. So but there's really underrated ones like Pittsburgh, super
Yep.
underrated. Um, but you know, uh, Wrigley around Wrigley, but not
Mm,
Wrigley. Wrigley's sort of like
I feel
old
the
and
same way.
whatever. But around Wrigley, that's what caught me off guard.
Yeah.
Like compared to Fenway, I was like, there are a trillion more bars and
They've done an
restaurants,
amazing job.
and I think that's a big part of it,
Yep.
right?
Yep. The
So,
magic is all around. I love it. All right, last one. What's the name of your fantasy football team?
the Inglorious Bradfords.
That's really good. I like it.
Yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
great.
Everyone, you had said like my Twitter handle. We talk about Twitter. So that's another thing. I mean, I could never ever get a let's see, it's a six letter
Right.
word, that is my nickname ever, unless I got in really early. And I remember a good friend of ours,
Oh
Chalk,
yeah.
who said who was whose instincts on this may have been a little off. He's like, "That's a terrible Twitter handle." I'm like, it's perfect. It's if I do nothing else in this world, I have a good Twitter handle. So much so that Wayne, I was sitting around because you and I are the same thing. Like we sit around and we just like, hey, this seems like a good idea.
Let's
Let's
try it.
try it, right? I'm sitting around. You know what would be funny if I made up T-shirts with just my Twitter handle on it. I had no motivation for anything. Like there wasn't like I was promoting something, anything. I just like, you know what would be funny if I just started giving out these T-shirts with my Twitter handle on it. So I spent $500 and I did that and, people like free T-shirts, so there you go.
Yeah, and they were everywhere. They were all over.
Yeah, I mean there's no downside. I mean, it's so
Yep.
random that people will
Yep.
wear it, and I'm the big winner. I mean, I feel like the next step is I just got a Jeep, so getting one of the, tire
Oh yeah.
covers,
With it on
like
there.
yeah, well, that would be a little too, self-promoting,
Well, it's
I
also
don't know.
scary because then
I don't
people
know.
know it's you driving down the street, and there's a whole
Yeah,
other thing.
yeah,
All right,
that's fair, that's fair.
final section, which is the whole impetus of this whole project, which is providing value. Um, I think we touched a little bit on this at the beginning, but if somebody was looking to break into the sports media industry, what advice would you give them?
I think, well, besides the, show a good work ethic, show a commitment, show a passion, don't worry about the money initially. That's another thing that I think people get twisted. It's an unfortunate thing sometimes, but Wayne, you and I both know what the age 26 means when someone turns 26. It's when they come off their parents' health
Mm-hmm.
insurance, and that's when they start asking for full-time
Mm-hmm.
jobs. So do whatever you can until you're
Right.
26 and keep chasing your dream, because once you take your foot out, it's really hard to put your foot back in. Like you were doing the DJing and all the other stuff while you were doing something that you love doing, and look what it
Yeah.
landed you. But you kept doing it even though there were these long, long hours. So never take your foot out the door where you're not chasing it. And I think that's the biggest thing. You have to keep I tell people this all the time, is that every day take just do one thing, that's it, one thing that helps
Yep.
you, that's it. And it's better than sitting around, and you would buy no one but no plenty of people who years upon years upon years in the radio industry would bitch and moan and bitch and moan and bitch and moan and not look for something else or whatever it is, and then boom, here comes the hammer. Well, what are you going to
Yep.
do? But always take a step forward. And the last thing is, always understand what your employer or potential employer values the most. Don't look at it like, this is what I want to do. What do they value the most? In our industry, do they value page views over audio downloads, over video downloads, whatever it is? Do what they value the most. And Wayne, in the media industry, that has changed like every
Yep.
year almost. So I can't emphasize enough,
Great one.
because that is you have to make the person who hires you look good,
Yep.
because they have to look good to the people above them. That would be
I
the
love
other.
that. All right. I'm going to leave you with an easy one then. What's the best part of your job?
Oh, that I get to do what I do and not do something else. I mean, that seems like a simplistic thing, but I could say these other I was driving down the street today. So I this is how, like, I love creativity, right? I love just doing stuff for the sake of doing it. So I had an interview with guy Tyler O'Neill yesterday, who's this guy who was traded to the Red Sox. And he was in town. He was in Boston for like a day. And I said, I owe you a t-shirt. So I woke up this morning at 5. He was leaving for the airport at like 8. I drove in and I delivered his t-shirt to the hotel. Didn't see him. Just here, give this t-shirt. You know why? Because it made me feel like I did something
Mm-hmm.
productive. My point was now is that when I'm driving home at 7:30, 8 a.m., I see a couple vans that were for, I think, a flooring company. And all I can think of was like, that's for somebody, but it's not for
Right.
me. And I can't imagine the getting in a van right now. And again, this isn't a knock
Sure.
on those
No.
people. Like, they have a passion for it, but the way that I'm wired, I feel like I am so fortunate that I can wake up at 5 or 5:30 and feel like I am doing something that I want to do. I'm like unbelievably fortunate in that respect. So I don't know if that answered the
No, that's
question,
it.
but
That's a great answer. I mean, that's what we all strive for, right? Like that is, and if, for anybody, if you can wake up and finish the day saying, gosh, that was a great day. I got to do that today. That's the power. I'll leave you with this my side of that, which is we just came back from doing a production shoot in a warehouse fulfillment center, right? And one of the clients said to me, dude, you used to produce Major League Baseball players, NFL players, and now you're doing this. Like, how do you still enjoy it? And I was like, actually, I'm enjoying it because I already know how to do that. This is a challenge for me to figure out how we're gonna convey this story, because this isn't as easy of a story of going, wow, Fernando Tatis is really good. Look at him. He's great, right? Like that's really, I mean, not that hard. Taking a box, going down a conveyor belt and making that just as interesting is really a mental like challenge that I really enjoyed taking on.
Yeah, I mean, I think that you you have to do things that you've I always said this is that I can do TV, I can do radio. Nothing fulfills me more than
Mhm.
writing. Why? Because it's hard. You have to be creative and you have to be able to construct something. And I think Wayne, like, yeah, there's things that you have to do in your old job or your current job, whatever it is. But it's all right to think about other things about what I can do on top of that. I coach high school basketball. It helps me distract from my job, and my job that helps me distract from it.
Mhm.
The last thing I'll say is that, so for instance, I have a Hall of Fame ballot, right? So I vote for the Hall of Fame. Every single writer releases their ballot by tweeting it out. Here's my ballot. Who's who I vote for? Well, like, how much fun is that? Like, it's not fun at all. So the first year I had batting stance guy imitator.
Yep.
The next year I had DB Sweeney dressed up as shoeless Joe Jackson. I flew to Chicago with my family to film this the day after Christmas for zero reason, for no payment at all, only because it made me feel
Right.
good about doing something
I love
creative.
that.
My point is that when you wake up, if you can feel that way, that there's avenues to take where you're gonna finish the day and put your head on the pillow, where you say, "I did a good job and I did something that is fulfilling and creative," or whatever it is, then that's a good
I
job.
love it. Rob, thank you so much. Let's just plug away here. Obviously at Bradfo, we got that, but the baseball isn't boring podcast. Anything else that people should be aware of?
Nah, I mean, the Baseball's and Boring podcast every day. I appreciate that, and if you want a good holiday gift, a book, A Damn Near Perfect Game is the latest book with Joe Kelly, who all of a sudden is huge in Japan now because he gave Shohei Ohtani his
Oh,
number.
wow.
So
That's
yeah,
amazing.
so
I love it.
we're the big winner.
Awesome.
But yeah, no, I Wayne, always an awesome time, and you're an inspiration to me and to us all. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Rob. Thank you so much. And we'll talk soon. Thanks, buddy.